Welcome to the Story a Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy from storyaday.org, encouraging you to be a writer every day, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie here from the Story a Day podcast. Last week, I talked about the end of Story a Day September and burnout and how to figure out how much of a break to take. I had kind of a formula for you depending on how intensely you work on your writing. This week, I'm assuming you've been through that process. You've figured out how much of a break to give yourself. And I do encourage you to consider giving yourself a break. This week, I want to talk about what comes next. Getting back into your writing after an intense period of writing, if you take a little break, can take some doing. And it's not a reason for you not to take a break, because all of this stuff happens every day when you sit down. You need to know why you're there. Taking time out of your day to write isn't easy. Having the courage of your convictions and being willing to be vulnerable and put them down on paper isn't easy. And sticking to your own goals isn't easy. For most of us. There are a few rare people who can just decide to do something and then they do it, but they are not, in my experience, the majority of us. And I say this having worked with authors since 1998, having been one of you all my life, having really focused intensely on my own writing over the past 10 years. So what do you do when you want to keep coming back consistently to your writing? You need to be surrounding yourself with people who are supportive. I say need, you don't actually need to do that. It just makes it so much easier if you can. That's one of the things that I've really noticed in the Story a Day Superstars group. And if you're listening to this podcast on the day it airs, you might want to check the show notes because I am opening up the Superstars just this weekend to celebrate the end of Story a Day September. And so if you've been looking for that accountability and a place to find feedback on your work and a place to just keep you turning up week after week, month after month, you might want to join us. But that's all the hard sell I'm going to do. It's there, take a look, see if it's for you. It'll be back in April for those of you, who aren't ready yet. So once you have that mindset in place that you're going to do this no matter what, you're going to be a writer no matter what. When you have a body of work like the stories you might have written during Story a Day September, or, NaNoWriMo's coming up, and in December you're going to have this process happening again, where you've got a bunch of work and you need to figure out what to do with it. So my process for that, I'm going to suggest 3 steps. We talk about revising our work, but what we really need to do first is assess it. You have lots of words written. You have lots of stories, or if you're writing novels, you have chapters, you have storylines, you have character arcs. Lots of things you could work on. So assess what you want to work on. If you've got a stack of stories from Story a Day September or May or any past event, look through them, read through them, and just pay attention to your gut. Does this story, as imperfect as it may be, or this outline, as incomplete as it may be, does it excite you? That's question 1. Does it excite you? For example, if you're writing a story and there's a romance element and you just kind of put it in because that's what you put in, and it occurs to you that what would really excite you is writing these characters in a way that either they're asexual or they are, purely platonic friends, and you've second-guessed yourself because that you haven't seen much of that in mainstream fiction. Writing it that way might be the reason that you're not super excited about the story. So A, does it excite you the way you've written it or outlined it? And B, could it? If you like some things about a story, but there are some things you're not jazzed about, how could you change it to make it could you change it? Not even how yet, we're not into that question yet, but just could you change it to make it more exciting to you to write the story? If yes, put it in the priority pile. If no, let's let it sit for a bit. The next question, once you've got all your stories, you've got your priority stories, the ones that either excite you or you can see how they could excite you. Once you've got them in a pile, ask yourself, do you have the skills right now to make them better? And it's okay if the answer is no. If you've written a story that is a time travel, twisty, Memento type, Christopher Nolan type story, and you haven't written very many stories at all, then that is, turning the difficulty knob way up. So sure, you may have the skills to make it work, but maybe you want to learn some skills. So the next question after you've got your priority pile of stories or chapters that excite you, do you have the skills to write this particular story the way you want to write it? And if it's like, I'm not sure, then give it a shot. If you're like, wow, I keep getting stuck and I keep grinding to a halt, then maybe it's a question of skills. Maybe you're not quite confident in how to structure an opening, a middle, and an ending. That's something that I take you through on my 3-day challenge, which I talk about on this podcast a lot. It's 3 days, and each day we focus on, we write a story every day, but we focus on openings on day 1, middles on day 2, endings on day 3. If you need to figure out how to write mysteries, there are writing teachers out there who that's all they talk about. So if the answer to, do I have the skills to revise and complete this story right now is no, that's okay. Because as writers, we're curious people. Most of us are lifelong nerds. We love learning. Go find a course, go find a class, go find a book that will help you get the skills. You can always get the skills to become better. So the stories that you don't currently have the skills for, the question becomes then, am I going to go get the skills and keep working on that story? Or am I going to write some other stories in the meantime? Maybe you find a class, but it's not for 3 months. So, take some of your other stories out of the priority pile where you believe you probably do have the skills to finish them. It's not hopeless. It's never hopeless. But, do you think you could manage it? Probably. It might stretch you a bit, but yeah, okay, I could probably make this work. Then work on those ones, right? And the other ones that still excite you, make an appointment with yourself to figure out what it is that is hanging you up about them, what skills you lack, and to go and research where you could brush up on those skills. Take a workshop. I like workshops where you get to learn and implement in the same workshop. That's how I run mine, because that's what I like. So I'll be announcing a bunch of workshops coming up at Story a Day. You can see if any of those match up with the skills gaps that you're looking at there. So that's the first 2 steps of the assess phase, and I think they're the most important ones. So you should, at this point, once you've been through that process, you should have a pile of stories, a much, much smaller pile of stories or outlines from what you started with, and they excite you, and you think you probably have the skills right now to complete them or revise them. There's another part of the assess phase which we tend to jump to way too quickly, which is, is there an audience for this? Where would I get this published? And that's a question that has a place in our process. But I think it has to come much, much later. Because I was on a panel, and I may have quoted this before, and I'm probably going to quote it again because I thought it was brilliant. I was watching a panel, and there was a writer called Kiese Lehman, and he was answering a question about whether we should write about people from marginalised groups if we're not within that group. But I think his answer is applicable to all writing. And what he said is we have to do the hard work. We have to talk to people. We have to mine the work that came before. He's talking about knowing the the canon, not the old literature canon that was when I was at college with old dead white guys, but what's been written in the areas that you like to write. And he said, we have to be willing to say, I might not be the right person to tell this, which is kind of upsetting. But the next thing that he said is the brilliant part, I think. He said, do the work and make it good. Create rigorous art first. And be willing to then ask, do you need to and deserve to capitalize on the work? And for need to and deserve to capitalize on the work, I think that applies to all of us. Like sending your work out and trying to get it published in the traditional channels, that's what we're doing. We're asking people to say, yes, your work deserves to be in my publication. So it can hang us up. When you think about the odds of getting something published, and when you think about the fact that you're writing something quirky that you don't know the magazine it should go into, that shouldn't hold you back. Because by the time you do the work, make it good, create rigorous, quirky, idiosyncratic stories, by the time you've done all that work, somebody could have made a new magazine that's perfect for it. So we really have to guard against holding ourselves back because we're not sure who's out there waiting for what we're writing. That's not so much our job. Unless you're determined to be a commercial writer, unless you're determined to be James Patterson or someone like that, where it's very audience focused, it's very commercial focused, and you just want to get, the chain of bestsellers, the big income, the movie deals, and that's all that matters to you. And doing your own work is something you're willing to compromise on. Then I think listening to Kiese Lehman's advice and doing the work, creating rigorous art first, and then being willing to ask, should this be out in the world? Where should it be? All of that stuff. I think that's the order. And that's the reason why Story a Day is structured the way it is. Way back in 2010, I said to people, don't post your work here. This isn't about posting and sharing your work. I'm not going to talk about getting your work published, even though I have a background in helping people get published. I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff because I saw how detrimental it was to the work. It's part of the process. It's something we talk about a lot in the Superstars group because those writers are writing regularly and they're ready for the next step in a lot of their work. Not all of it, but in a lot of their work, they're ready for that next step. So we talk about that stuff there, but I don't talk about that stuff in general because the work, it paralyzes you and it holds you back from doing the work that you should be doing, from creating rigorous art. So have I hammered that point hard enough? I think I probably have. So the first step in dealing with this work that you have created over the last month or whenever is assessing it. What do you want to work on? What excites you? What do you have the skills to work on right now? How can you get the skills? How can you change something if it's not exciting you right now? How can you tweak it so it does excite you? And then much later, worry about the audience and publication. Once you have that stack, pick your favourite thing. And this is the third part. I'm going to talk next week more about critiquing your work and revising your work. This week, I'm just talking about this assess phase because I think it's so important to work on the right things at the right time. And this is my last point for today, to work on something either until it is done or until you are well and truly stuck. Because either you lack a skill, you don't know how to do the middle, you don't know how to put an ending on, you don't know what to do with these characters, you've realised that your dialogue is stilted, whatever it is that you need, you realise your skills need to level up. Seriously, not the danger here. And I was talking to somebody this week, I was talking to a superstar, and we were laughing about the fact that when a story gets difficult, you get a certain, like 25% of the way into the story, all of a sudden, these new stories start to look, you're like, oh, this isn't working. I don't know what to do with this. I'm just going to start a new story. And ever since then, I have been seeing memes everywhere with people posting about this, with various memes, and they're all like, my current book idea and then my new book idea, and it's somebody yelling into the person's ear with a new book trying to get attention. So here is, and I've been sending them to her relentlessly, even though she's not a meme person. Sorry about that. So here's the last step of the transition between assessing your work and beginning to work on them. You pick your favourite story and you work on it alone until you get stuck or until you're finished. And when I say finished, I mean just finish this draft, finish this round, right? You've made it good enough for now. You've put an ending on it. You've made it as good as you can make it right now. Then and only then do you get to pick up the second one from the pile. And I know that sounds prescriptive. And for some of you, that's not the way you're going to work, because you can very happily, and you're actually happier working on multiple stories at the same time. And you are given a dispensation here. If you're being productive and you know that working on multiple things at the same time keeps you productive, then you just go ahead and do that. Just ignore what I'm saying here. This is for people who are, who haven't figured out their style yet, or who consistently fail to finish things. Pick a thing, pick a story, pick a novel, and finish it. Finish it. And if you get stuck, then you can write something else, but it has to be shorter. It has to be something you can finish in one writing session. There you go. That's my new rule. And then you have to go back and you have to figure out either you're going to get the skills to finish this thing, or you're going to just write it at your current skill level and you're just going to blast your way through and figure it out later. But finish your stories. Finish your novels. Finish your memoirs. Don't get distracted by the shiny new thing, because the shiny new thing is all potential. It's all perfect. It's up there, perfectly in your head. Anna Patchett has that quote about, this the new idea is this perfect little butterfly in beautiful, perfection floating around, and you grab it and you smush it on the page, and then it's, what it is. So don't get distracted by the shiny, beautiful butterflies. Finish your work. Next week, I'm going to talk to you about how you do some of those things, how you critique your own work, so you can figure out what needs to be done with it. And then we'll be talking about how to revise your work I'm not sure if we'll get to that next week. Might be a following episode. But this month is going to be all about that stuff. So, to sum up, assess what you've got, assess what you want to work on, figure out what excites you, figure out what you have the skills for, finish pieces. And if you're looking for accountability and friendship and a good crew of buddies, writing buddies, to keep you turning up week after week and to keep you honest about what you're doing, consider joining the Superstars this weekend. We meet for our monthly hangouts this Sunday and Monday. We've got a critique week coming up, which you'll be invited to. We've got workshops coming up most months of the year when there isn't a critique week. We've got other hangouts that we do. We've got daily writing sprints. Come on over to the site, follow the link in the show notes, and see if it's for you. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week to talk about critiquing your work and revising, and I hope you have a wonderful writing week. Keep writing. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week, and of course, keep writing.